Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill out the portholes. There's an awful lot to drill out because I'm going to light the ship and I want it to look nice. Actually, I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to paint the chrome on the inside, so it'll be a nice reflections for the LED tape that I'm going to put in. And I'm going to be using Rust-Oleum metallic finish chrome, and I'll put a couple of coats in here and I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's sprayed. A good heavy coat, so it's going to be nice and reflective in there. Alright, so it had a chance to dry. You can see how lovely the inside looks. Nice and reflective. So it's going to do a really good job in reflecting all the lights to the portholes. I love the Rust-Oleum. I think that's the best spray paint. So that's looking good. So we're going to move on. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to start the long journey of drilling out all the portholes. There's a couple of ways that we can do that, and I'll show you guys. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can drill out the portholes. You can use a drill. And I've got the cordless drill. Now, the problem with using a power drill, yes, it'll save time and it'll be fast, but you got to watch out about that, because what it's going to do is it actually melts the plastic. And it could warp it. And this is really thin. This isn't the biggest. The trumpeter is really thick. The hull is really thick. It's almost 1/8 of an inch thick, so it's pretty thick. This isn't. So you got to be mindful that when you drill, you don't melt or warp the plastic in any way. So if you're going to use the hand drill, you want to do it where, well, you got to put it on a slow setting or do it really slow. And then there's the other way of doing it. That's probably going to be better for the ship. You can see it's the hand drill. And one of the smaller holes, see, because the holes in the portholes, they're not all the same size. So you take the smaller one, you put it right into the depression, and you twist. Now, guys, I know this is the long, tedious way, but if you do it this way, you're going to ensure that the plastic won't melt or warp in any way. You can see it does go through. It does take time. The little handheld drill, I think I'm halfway through now. You can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see that I had going through. But it's looking good. You can see it's through, and it's nice and smooth on both sides. So now let me show you how I would do it with the power drill. First of all, I don't know if the power drill is going to be able to hold such a small this bit. One, it doesn't have a size on here, so I don't know which one it is to tell you, but lining it up, that one looks still a little bit large. So let's go down to the next size. That looks pretty good. And that looks like it fits. So you've got the larger holes genuinely on top. Because, you know, if all the holes are the same size, it's going to look more like a toy. But if you have it more detailed out with different size holes and you take a picture of it up close, it'll look more like the real thing. So let me see if the drill, because I don't think the drill is going to hold this. Right, but we can try. It actually held. Right, so it's going to be a little bit fast. So you can't just put it on there and go to town. So what I'm going to show you guys is I wanted to show you guys a way to do it each way with the power drill and with the hand drill. So you take it, and I hope the camera picks this up, and you put it right into the depression of the porthole. Hopefully you can see that. And you go nice and slow, and as soon as you pierce, you take it right back out. Then you can go back in, and that looks nice. Let me see, make sure you guys can see that. You probably won't be able to see it. Let me see if you guys can see the opening this way. Right there. So once you got the hole, and where is it again? I lost it, it's right here. And you want to just clean it up. Make sure the sides of the hole are nice and smooth. And like I said, you don't want to rush through it if you're going to use the power drill, and you don't want the plastic melting. So let's go ahead, and now I'm going to drill out all the holes, and I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's done. Alright, so I finished drilling all of the portholes on the starboard side. Now, when I was telling you guys about different holes, different sizes, and how it's important to keep the different sizes there, you can see in the middle, let me show you, see if you can get that. See, they're really small. There's a whole row of really small portholes, half the size of the rest. Now, because it's a small kit, some of them were off center and they weren't in the right spot, so I didn't drill those out. And in my opinion, it'll be more noticeable if I drill out the portholes and they're in the wrong place than not drilling some out, because then you can it'll just appear that some of the lights are off. So let me show you. You take a light, and you can see how, kind of an idea of how it's going to look. See the smaller holes? Let me shut the lights off for a second, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. You can see the holes better in the portholes. Now, see the smaller holes? I wanted to keep them uniform, and there was some that were off center. They weren't in the right spot, so I figured I would not drill them, and you know, the lights in those rooms could be off. You can see all the way down to the bow. There are different sizes in the bow. It's a lot of work, but it is worth it. You can see the smaller holes as we go towards the stern. So the starboard side's all finished. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip it around, and we're going to do the port side. And when that's all done, I'll show you guys what that looks like. Alright, so I finished doing the port side. Let's see if that can focus for you. Again, you got the different sized portholes, and after you get done drilling, what I like to do is I like to lightly sand the inside just to get a lot of the shards out. And if you notice that there are any on the other side, I like to take the little tool, gently put it into the porthole until they're all nice and clean. So let me show you guys with the light. And see if you can see the smaller portholes. Now I did the same thing I did on the other side. They're not all drilled out. Some of them were in the wrong spot, and I didn't want it to look obvious. Let me shut the lights off so you guys can see a better shot of the lit portholes. Let's start at the front. You can see the smaller ones. All right, hopefully you're able to see that on the camera. Let me put the light back on. Now what we're able to do, since all the portholes are drilled out, now we can start focusing on the outside of the hull. Okay, so now we're ready to put, let's see where the propeller shafts are going to be coming out of the bottom of the hull. I'm going to be putting on the parts that attach to there. So let's see, we want to open up the tree. And you guys can see on this part, let's see, what number is it? Looks like 11. Anyway, these are where the propeller shafts come out. So we need 2 of these. You can lightly rotate them, just enough, and then eventually they come right off. And same thing with this side, back and forth, just ever so slightly, and then they just come right off. Put the tree aside. Now what I like to do is, there's going to be a little bit of extra plastic coming off where it was attached to the tree. Now let me show you guys what I like to use. I got my little snips. You could use a razor too. So you got it like that, and I like to just snip it so that is flush. Also, let me show you guys, maybe this is a better way of doing it. Use my trusty razor. I take the piece and gently run the razor along it until you get rid of the excess plastic. Let's see, maybe just a little bit more on this. There, that's a little bit better. And we'll do the second one. You can see, getting just enough to slice off the extra. And then you do the same thing on the bottom. Be careful not to cut yourself. You can see that it's all set and ready to go. So now let's glue them onto the hull. Alright, so what I did was I put on the little parts where the propeller shaft are going to be coming from. Make sure they're even. And I like to use the Plastruct bonding. I think it does a really good job, and it's easy to use. And it's really strong. It did come with a tube of cement. If you choose to use that, that's fine. But I choose to use the Plastruct bonding. So when this is dry, what we're going to do now is we're going to mask it off, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to paint the bottom of the hull. Alright, so when I masked it off, I don't have to be too particular on the first part where the red is going to go, because I'm going to mask it off better when I do the black. But you can see I got the port side all set and masked off. And all masked off. You can see I like to use the blue Scotch tape. It doesn't stick too hard, but it doesn't, it's enough to keep everything in place, but when you pull it off, it's not going to pull off the paint. So that's the port side. You can see it's all nice and done. So let's go ahead and we'll do the starboard side, and I'll show you when it's all masked up and ready to paint. Alright, so you can see I did both sides, and I masked it off. Like I say, you don't have to be as particular when you do the first coat, the red, because when I move on to the black, I'm going to be a little more precise in the masking location. You can see the bow, and I make sure the tape is nice and snug up against the plastic so no overspray goes underneath. You can see the starboard side, the same thing. And what I like to do is I actually took both sides, one there up over the ship to protect any paint from getting inside the ship, and I folded it in, stapled it, and I actually made kind of like a handle so I can hold on to it while I paint. So now it's all set. Let's move on to what I'm going to use for a paint. I'm going to use Krylon, the Color Max. This is the paint and the primer. I was looking at different colors of paint for the Titanic hull, and I was thinking, well, I could go to the modelers' websites and overpay for paint that looks pretty much the same color as this. And I had gone to Lowe's, and this was actually $3.95, and it's the color red that I like. Don't worry that it's gloss. It's high gloss, but that will be toned down at the end with the sealant. And this color red is very close to the red that they call for. So let's go ahead, and because it's got the paint and the primer, we'll probably just need a couple of coats, if that. So let's go ahead and we paint the hull of the Titanic. Alright, so I had just painted the hull. I gave it one coat. And when you use spray paint, guys, it's probably a good idea to wear gloves without thinking. Looks like a bloody mess, but it's paint. You can see when it's dry, I got it hanging up by the paper and the tape. So when it's dry, I'll give it 24 hours and I'll show you guys what it looks like when I take off the mask. Alright guys, when it comes to the power supply, because I told you I'm going to light this kit, and the way the batteries are situated in the model kit, all of the pieces are meant to go in the bottom of the ship, in the hull. Now as you can see, over time, all the parts and the hull is actually going to be glued on to the top. Now I was thinking, I'm going, well, because I'm going to put the rigging on. And with all the rigging, and I'm going to put the rigging on the smokestacks as well. And it's not called for on this model. But looking at the model kit base, I'm thinking instead of putting all of the battery components in the bottom of the ship, and every time the batteries die, I'm going to have to worry about taking off the superstructure, instead, I'm going to come up with an idea to do the batteries and put them in the base. Now it's going to be a tough project because you can see it's all completely open. Now let me show you the base. The base is absolutely beautiful. So I'm thinking, how can I utilize the parts that came with the ship for the battery? Well, let me show you the parts that come with the base as well. You can see. Actually, let me go ahead and I'm going to take the parts out of the plastic wrap and I'll take them off to give you guys a better idea of what they actually look like. You can see R.M.S. Titanic, and these are the, let's see, does this go on the ship? I think these reinforce the base on either side, and these are the parts that go up against the ship. So let me get them off the tree and I'll show you guys what it's all. So I took off the parts for the base. And you can see, those of you who have done the R.M.S. Titanic from Revell 1570, this is exactly the same. And this is going to go into the little groove. Now, because I love the base so much, I don't really want to paint it. Because it's perfect brown, I'm thinking what I'd like to do is maybe these parts, I can kind of make it almost look like a trophy. I think I'm going to put the nameplate gold, with these parts gold, to try to resemble metal and make it look like it's metal on wood. But the problem that I'm going to have is, let's see, you can see, putting it into the, okay, you put the name tags into the base, and it kind of slants inward. As you can see, these are meant to go on. But in order to get these on, you have to slightly angle. Let me get both of them lined up for you. They have to be angled in. Now you see how they're angled in like that, and the ship rests on top. Now, I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get a battery pack in there. Obviously, I can't use the one that's included in the ship, because that's meant to go with the base of the model, and I'm going to be closing it. So I'm going to try to figure out how to get the battery pack and get it to fit inside the base without it looking terrible. So I took the parts, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean them up, and I'm going to paint them gold, and then I'm going to show you guys what it looks like after it's painted. Alright, so far I put the sides of the plaque on the base up, and I glued the tops where the ship is going to rest. Now, there is sides that go on. Let me show you the instructions. You can see the two parts go on each side to anchor the base as it goes to the bottom. But what I'm going to do is, because I'm going to light it, and I can't use what's in the bottom of the hull, I'm going to use my battery pack. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put the battery pack in between the nameplates. But I can't, I'm probably not going to be able to permanently cement the parts to the base, unless I try doing it where I leave one off so I can slide the battery pack out to change the batteries. But I'm going to give this a chance to dry. That way there I can handle it and move things around, and I'll show you guys what my idea is when it's dry. Alright, so I glued the pieces together for the base, but I didn't do all of them. I left one side open. So after this is painted, I'll be able to just slide the power pack in, and that's how I'm going to power the model. Because the base is way too small and thin to use the switch, and there would be way too much wires on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is this, the power pack that I have has a switch on it. So I'm going to wire and solder male and female leads onto here, and then the male and female will be coming from the ship, and I'll be able to just disconnect it, remove the batteries, and change them as needed. So let's move on to this. I'm going to actually paint it, and I think I'm going to go with gold. Alright, so I decided to go with the Testors gold, because I think it looks, well, there's like a class to it. I think it looks really good gold, and I think it's going to go great on the wood. The base looks like walnut, so I think the gold and the walnut will go together very well. I may decide to paint the raised lettering. It depends, because I think it looks pretty good like that. But we'll see. So I'll wait for this to dry, and then I'll glue it to the base. Alright, so I put 2 coats of paint on the hull, and I'm ready to go ahead, and I'll take the mask off and we'll take a look and we'll see how it came out. All right, so I took the paint, the mask off, and you can see there was bleed through or drip from the paint down the ship. And like I said, doing the black section, I'm going to have to be a lot more careful with the masking. But it's still a little bit tacky, so I'm going to let it dry another 48 hours. And that way there it'll be okay to handle. And I'm going to have to sand the top of the ship and mask it off, and we'll paint the black. Alright, so this had some time to dry. And I think it looks pretty good. It looks classy with the gold. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glue it to the bottom of the base. Alright, so I went ahead, I glued the plaques to the base. And, you know, I think it looks pretty good the way it is. The gold and the walnut finish. I was going to paint the raised letters black, but you know, I think I like it this way. So I think I'm going to leave it like this. So now I'm going to move on to the power supply. And I'll show you guys how I'm going to alter that. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make a male and a female. I'm going to make the positive is going to be male, the negative is going to be female. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the harnesses, and I'm going to make the clips where they're going to clip together. And out of the bottom of the ship, I'll have the two wires coming out, and it'll be the leads that'll have the other positive and negative, male and female, and they'll go together. That way there, when the batteries need to be changed, I can just disconnect the power supply, slide it out of the base, change the batteries, put it back in and clip them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder these on, and then I'll put them into the clip, and I'll show you what they look like when they're ready to be used. Alright, so I got the leads soldered on. You got the female right there. And for the positive lead, you got the male. And it's going to go, let's see, where is it? Into the housing, the two-prong housing. And when I get them in, I'll lock them into place and I'll show you what they look like. Okay, so these are the leads that are going to be coming from the ship. This is going to be powering all the lighting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these into the capsule, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's ready to connect to the power supply. Now I put them in the housing, so when you want to put the power supply up to the ship, you put the female to the male on the negative, and then you put the female to the male on the positive. And I put them in a little housing to keep them separated so I don't have to worry about them shorting. That way there, when you want to change the batteries, you can just take them out. It's hard to do with one hand, but you can just take them out. You can take the battery pack out of the base, change the batteries, put it back in, and you can put the male to the females, and the power supply will be hooked up to the ship again. So, now that the power supply is all set, we're ready to move on to finish painting the hull. Okay, so we had some time, and now it's nice and dry, and it's like a shell. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mask off the black part. Well, I'm going to mask off the red part to paint the black. So now I'm going to be a little more careful, and the tape is going to have to go on, and I'm going to have to angle the spray paint away so it doesn't drip underneath and contaminate the red. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give it a little bit of a coat, because you can see where it kind of dripped onto the hull. So let me give it a light sand, and then I'm going to mask it off, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so what I did was I put the line, I put the tape, I masked off the red section with the paper, and I like to fold the paper and make like a handle so I can hang on to it while I paint. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to paint the black section. And we're going to angle it down so the spray doesn't go inside and cover up the chrome. Okay, so you can see where I put a coat. I put a nice fine mist, thin coat to begin with. You can see where I sanded and where there's still red. I just wanted to get a good coat on, or at least a finish, a first coat, that ever important first coat, just to kind of get the paint, a base of the paint. So when this is dry, I'll give it another coat. Alright, so I took the masking off. I had put 2 coats of the black. The gloss just shows up every little imperfection. So I'm hoping when I put on the matte finish that'll take that shine right away, and it'll make it look, well, a little more realistic. Because right now it just looks like a shiny toy, a badly painted shiny toy. So when this is dry, because I'm going to let it dry now because I had to, when I took off the masking tape, because the paint, well, it's liquid, so it dripped, and I couldn't help it to drip a little bit because the tape didn't make perfect contact with the surface because of the ridges. So I had to get a paintbrush, and I went and I kind of, all of the little imperfections, kind of straightened them out on both sides. Let me see if I can turn the ship around for you. And see the other side to make the line a little straighter because there was some drips. So when this is all dry, I'm going to work on the yellow line, and then we'll paint the top where the superstructure is going to be. Alright, so I masked it off for the white section. You can see the part that's going to be white all the way around. And like I did with the red and the black, I'm going to use the Rust-Oleum. So I'm going to show you guys what it looks like after it's painted. Alright, so I gave it 1 coat. I'm probably going to do the second coat, maybe by brush. Depends, because I don't want the drip marks to go everywhere like it did last time. But we'll see when this is dry. Okay, so I took the mask off. And boy, what a difference that final layer makes, huh? I love the Rust-Oleum white. I think it looks fantastic. In contrast with the black and the red of the hull. There's a little bit in the back that I should, you can see it's not really that even, so I'll do a little bit of evening out with the black paintbrush, but as a whole, it came out pretty good. There's some little areas that I'll touch up with the paintbrush, like over there, but there's not as many as there was with the red and the black. You can see she's looking pretty spectacular. Now, every time I do research on the Titanic, I think I like to be pretty thorough. Now, when it comes to the line on her hull, the gold line, it is obvious in all of the White Star Line advertisements of the time, you can see the illustrations have both the Olympic and the Titanic with the yellow stripe. I've tried to look through the pictures that I could, and it's not really easy to see. There are some pictures on the internet that people claim that were the Titanic that actually were the Olympic. And in all the black and white pictures of the time, I just can't see the stripe. But that could be because it's black and white. Now the movie has the stripe. So what I think I'm going to do is I like the stripe. I like the way it kind of dresses her up. So I'm going to put the stripe, and I'm going to do it ever so small because this model is smaller scale. So I'm going to put it right underneath the white. So I'm going to mask it off, and I'm going to paint that with a brush. I'm not going to airbrush it, or I'm not going to use a spray can. It's starting to look like the Titanic. When I get it masked off and ready to paint, I'll show you guys what it looks like. Alright, so I got it masked off. And I'm going to do the small thin line, and I think I'm going to do the yellow, and I'll show you guys what that looks like after it's painted. Alright, so I'm using the tester's paint, I'm using the yellow, and I just put the first coat on, and I'll show you what it looks like after the second. Alright, so I just put the second coat on, and because it's going over industrial paint, it's probably going to need a few coats. So this is the second coat. The way it looks, I might need about 4, but we'll see. So I'll show you what it looks like after the third coat. Alright, so I put 3 coats on, and I took off the masking tape, and it's still a little bit tacky, so I'm going to let it dry for a while. And then I'm going to go, and like I did for the black and the red, for the yellow, the white, and the black, I'm going to touch up some of the spill marks, and I'm going to make it even. And I'll show you guys what that looks like when we're ready to move on. Alright, so what I did was I kind of cleaned it up a little bit. I cleaned up the stripes, the gold stripe, and I cleaned up the white. Let's see if I could turn it around for you without making a mess. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let it dry. And then, because I have no decals that came with the kit, I have to figure out how I'm going to paint on the words Titanic onto the ship. So when this is dry, that's what we'll do next. Alright, so I painted the letters Titanic onto the side of the hull. I'll show you the other side. And if it came out somewhat respectable, the back came out horrible. So that's not going to be my focal point of the ship, the back end. I tried looking for some aftermarket decals. I couldn't find any on eBay. So I'm going to live with this. Like I said, the focal point of this ship is not going to be the back. I'm sorry, Titanic. Alright, let's move on. Okay, so I used a toothpick and some gold paint to put the name of the ship on the hull. So while we wait for all the paint to dry, I think what I'm going to move on to is the lighting on the inside. And you can see I have the chrome paint in there, so it's got a nice reflection. And what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some LED tape. Now, I don't know if I'm going to go 2 strips, one on either side at the bottom, or I'm just going to put 1 at the bottom. Let's see what the 1 looks like. And I'm going to hook it up to a temporary power supply, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so I cut a light strip approximately the length of the hull to go from the bow to the stern. And I used some flux, and I soldered the leads, the positive and the negative. Let me get the power supply. Alright, so I got it hooked up to the battery pack, and it's only temporary. I got it hooked up with alligator clips right now, just to show you guys. So when you flip the switch, it goes on, and I'm going to put that into the bottom of the hull. I'm going to see what it looks like in the bottom and see if I need to actually put it on the sides and make more than one connection. I keep it at the bottom. So I'm going to hot glue it into place. Actually, let me place it inside and I'll show you guys what it looks like. Alright, so I got it in the bottom temporarily, and let's see what it looks like when we put the switch on. You can see it doesn't look too bad. Keep in mind I'm going to have lights on the bottom decks too, facing down. I'll show you guys what it looks like on the inside lit up. Now this isn't glued in place either. This is just temporarily put in. So I'm going to have to push it back a little bit and glue it, because you remember they got the battery compartments and the mount for the motor in here. So I'll glue this to that, and I'll hot glue it into place. And I got to keep in mind that the wires are going to be going down into the center of the ship, because what I'm going to do is they're going to run into the base, and then from the base they're going to wire directly to the power supply. So what I'll do is I'll hot glue it into place, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so I hot glued it into place. You can see on the inside it's all nice and bright. You can see it's lit up pretty good. And the top decks are going to be painted white for more reflection. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a strip underneath the deck as well, the main deck, because that'll help to illuminate the A, B, C, what would be that, D deck or C deck? But when all the paint is dry, we're going to be able to put the clear coat on to tone off all of the shine, and the hull, the outside of the hull, will be all set. Alright, so I placed it temporarily on the base, just to kind of get a sense where I'm going to drill into the hole for the wires to pass through to the base. Just wanted to kind of get a sense of what it's going to look like. You can see it looks better that I had drilled the smaller holes with the larger holes instead of drilling them all one size. You can see the light strip on the inside. And now we got to wait till it's good and dry. So what I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint the propellers, and I'm going to glue the propellers on. Alright, so I used the propellers that they gave the option of putting the shaft on for the motor, and I painted them gold, and I used the testers gold. So this is the port and the starboard, the three blade propeller. And let me show you the one that I had done, the middle, the turbine, the four blade propeller. Get both sides. So when these are dry, I'll take them off the trees and I'll attach them to the hull of the ship, and then I'll touch up the paint as needed. I use the same paint that I use to paint the name of the ship, and I think they look pretty good. So when these are dry, I'll show you what they look like when they're on the ship. Alright, just a little bit of an update while we wait for the paint to dry. I took a little bit of brown and I dry brushed just a bit onto the anchors. I took some brown paint, Testors brown paint, and I dried it off on a paper towel, and then I just just enough for it would show up a little bit, because you know the anchors, for them to show up because they're black, and you know on the real Titanic, even though it was new, there was rust on the anchors. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of line of rust coming down. Alright, so what I did was I put a little bit of rust coming down from the anchor. Now remember, she's brand new, and I'm not trying to make her look bad. I'm just trying to make it look realistic. So, you got a little bit of rust coming down each side. The model doesn't have the center anchor hole, so it's not that accurate. You can see the little bit of the rust coming down, and it'll look a lot better when I put the clear coat on, the finish. It'll take all that shine off. So then, when it's dry, I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I got the propellers put onto the ship. Let me show you guys. I painted them gold, and what I did was, because the propellers, these were for the ones that were going to go onto the rod that go on the motor. What I did was, because the holes in the back were a little bit larger, I used the glue gun, the hot glue gun, so I put them on with the hot glue. So now they're all set, and the only thing left now to do to the hull is to clear coat it and take off that shine. And I'm going to use the Rust-Oleum clear coat, the matte finish, and I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so I gave it a good coat of the clear, and you can see that this is another fail for me to share with you guys. When you use industrial paints and you decide to put a model paint, i.e. testers, on it and then use an industrial clear, it's going to damage the model paint. And this is another fail that I have to deal with, so I have to fix it. And the paint that I had put for the letters Titanic, well, they ran, so they're gone. I don't know if this one is still legible. Let me see. The camera doesn't want to zoom in. I can't tell if that looks like a mess too, so I'm going to have to paint over those, and I don't know, I may just leave it. But when this is dry, I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to touch up the model paint. So when it's completely dry, I'll be able to touch it up and I'll be able to drill through the bottom of the ship so I can attach all the wires to the base, and then we'll be ready to move on to the decks. Okay, so let me give you a bit of an update. I cleaned up the hull, cleaned up the lines, and I repainted the names on the back. I'm not even going to attempt to put Liverpool on it. Let me show you the Titanic in the front, and turn her around and show you the side of the back and the name that I put on the front. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill into the bottom of the hull so I can wire up the base, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, let me show you what I did. I drilled a hole in the bottom and I fed the power lines through, and it's going to be the alligator cup that's going to come out, and you'll be able to tell because the black is going to be male and the red is going to be female, or black positive and female negative, and it's going to be the opposite on the power supply. I ran it through the bottom of the hull, and all the wires for all the lights are going to connect to this, the main power supply. And when this goes through the base, I don't know, I was thinking about gluing the ship to the base. I probably should. Let me center it, show you guys what it looks like centered. I think that's looks just about right. That way there, you can hook up the power supply and not have to worry about the ship falling over. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to hot glue it to the base, and I'll show you guys what that looks like after it's all set. Okay, so I put the leads in, and the base, like I said before, the base has a switch, and it's going to go on the inside, and when you put it on, you can see now the lights are hooked up temporarily, and it's working off the light switch on the base, and you can see the light strip. And what I'm going to do is when I put the decks in, I'm going to paint the bottom of the decks with the reflective paint as well, and I'm going to put a light strip under them just to get it nice and bright. I think for now I'm not going to glue the ship to the base, just because I want to be able to get access to that a little bit easier, and I'll just have to be mindful that the ship is going to be free of the base. And I put a couple more portholes onto the aft end of the ship because that's what the Titanic had, windows all the way above the propellers. Not many, but they were there. And she's nice and dull. Well, not dull, but the shine is gone. You can see the lights. And now we're ready to move on to the decks. So that'll be the next video, and that'll be coming up very shortly. So let me show you a pass by of what she's gotten so far.